So improvising, something that's very much a part of your playing when you're soloing on stage. How do you think about improvising? I've asked every guitar player the same question because I love hearing everyone's take on it.
I just make it up as I go along.
Make it up, that's it. So just something of like a D minor or an A minor.
Yeah.
Soloing.
I know my scales, but I tend to think more about chords than scales.
About chords?
Because, and the reason is chords were my entry point into the guitar. So the first thing I learned most in the first sort of year of playing were chords. And it was, we talked about the visual aspect of shapes on guitar. So my fingers were already making shapes, which became the points of improvising. I would occasionally see a live concert on TV and there'd be guitarists and I'd be amazed how they're moving their hands up the neck, playing solos. And I of course, I was a beginner and I knew the C chord and I'd learned that shape as well. And I'm trying to figure out what are they doing? And it seemed logical. If I'm going to play a solo over a C chord, and I've got those notes, okay? How can, and at some point it occurred to me, well, they're moving their hands up the neck, so they're not just jumping, they're kind of, there's this thing happening.
Yeah.
So how can I connect that shape to that shape? And a lot of this was sort of just trial and error. So I want to get from there, jump up to there, and jump up to there. So, oh, that'll work. What if I use that note?
Yeah.
Oh. Wow, that unlocked a whole thing of getting from the C chord notes there to the C chord notes there just by a convenient slide up that took me to that position. And that was the beginning of that process. And then somewhere along the line, of course, I learned the blues scale and then combined threw that into it as well. But my initial thing was learning inversions of chords and figuring out how I can link these shapes.
Yeah.
And it was usually sort of a chromatic thing. I could get from this position to that position by a chromatic run. And I had the option, do I want to stay up there? In which case I would just flip my hand down to there.
Yep.
And I'd invent, when I discovered these things, I'd keep a notebook and I would try to give them a name or something to help me remember the idea and make it a shortcut that I could easily remember. So at some point I realized it sounds cool if I've got this C shape here, if I went and did like a semitone.
Oh, wow.
And it was, I'll make a semitone from a semitone below, go into any chord shape from a semitone below. And it doubles the number of notes that you've got. So, I'd sort of incorporate, and it immediately sounds jazzy.
Oh, instead of so cool.
Instead of doing that C arpeggio, you got a jazz lick.
Yeah.
So write down jazz lick, tick.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, what if I go a semitone above? That sounds a little bit bizarre, but you find ways of, they become connecting notes. So you might not want to use that in a C chord.
Yeah.
But as a passing or going up.
Yeah.
That actually works. It doesn't sound like a wrong note if it's on the way,
Yeah.
But if you land on it, that sounds wrong.
Yeah.
Trial and error.
Yeah, resolving. That's a brilliant way of thinking about. I've never thought, especially never taught with improvising, going off chord shapes, especially off C. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because it's, excuse me for saying, it's a bit of a duh moment for me, like, why not?
Oh, okay.
I mean it, and that'll probably change the way I think about improvising now. Because I was just thrown scales as a student, which, just historian, here's Ionian, and I learnt that, but never And I think because guitar, there is so much going on, when you do learn improvising, less is better when you've got less to think about. So, for example, taking that C shape and going like that and then adding that. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, but I can sort of look at the fingerboard and without putting my hands there, if you say D minor, I can see, like on a page when you had the little dot chord diagrams, I can see where my fingers are can go to make the D minor shape.
Yeah.
And if I was soloing, I'd straight away go to this kind of, you know, those shapes. And I wouldn't necessarily play arpeggios, but they're my key notes, and then it's just how do I land on them or go into them to create something interesting and spontaneous.
Thank you for sharing. I ask every guitar player how they think about improvising because I do know every guitar player has their thing. And when I was learning jazz, I had to find my thing. And Jamie Clark spoke quite a lot about, you know, does this work for me? And when he's teaching, finding what works for students. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, that's okay. It's kind of, it is a little bit genre specific too, I think. If you're a blues guitarist, you know, the blues scale and the variations on it are the obvious and logical place to start. But a lot of the tunes that I was learning, they weren't necessarily blues progressions. They would be either diatonic progressions or say something like that piece Liebestraum, that Chet piece that I first learned. You know, it goes from C to E7. Now you can't, and then it goes up a fourth, you're on A7 and up another fourth. So you're moving in and out of keys, so you can't use a scale. The blues scale is not going to work in this setting, nor will just a C scale because you're non-diatonic. So I had to think, well, how do I negotiate these chord changes? And you know, it became the chord shapes. There's the C triad, there's the E7 triad, there's the A7. So they're all in the vicinity, and I just had to remember not to play a wrong note, you know, landing on a wrong triad note or whatever. So it was an appropriate way to visualize handling those chord changes.
That's great.
singer-songwriter and try to play very melodic phrases that I'm singing in my head.
The improvising you just was so singable that you just did it, but there was so much technique and so much variety of styles in there. So,
thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
I don't consider myself like a shredder as such. It's very much a reaction to what it is. But that's the session guy thing, you know. We're going to play something tasteful and nice that's appropriate to the chords. And
I think as guitar players and even listeners in general, we're always still attracted to the singable solos, like the Sweet Child of Mine, Hotel California, where we can hum that. I love the shred, but I still do love, Brick in the Wall. The opening line to that is just still
or anything George Harrison.
Yeah. I mean, it's memorable.